Allotments, Part 1. So, what is an allotment? So, basically, an allotment is a display of budgetary activity over the course of a given fiscal year. Now, in most cases, a fiscal year will be broken up over the course of 4 quarters. Sometimes you will have allotments that take place monthly or on a 6 month basis, but in most instances, you will have a 4 quarter budgetary allotment. And these allotments will basically display all of the fiscal activity over the course of those 4 quarters. Now, what we have here is an example of an economic development budget over the course of a given fiscal year. And as you can see here, the fiscal year takes place over the course of 4 quarters. Okay, looking at our appropriation, we can see that our fiscal year begins October the 1st and ends September the 30th. Okay, so it begins October the 1st. This year in particular, this fiscal year began October the 1st, 2012, and it will set to end September the 30th, 2013. Okay, I know it's 2017 now, but in this example, we are going back in time. Okay, so now we have encumbrances and we also have expenditures as of March 31st, 2013. Okay, now given the March 31st date, you can tell that this report takes place, or rather includes all activity within the first 2 quarters. Okay, because again, if you look at when our fiscal year began, March 31st falls at the end of the second quarter. So this report includes all activities between these 2 quarters. Now, looking at our object classes here, we have salaries, benefits, supplies, computer equipment, food, net, and grants to other agencies. Okay, and because this is an economic development department, grants to other agencies is oftentimes going to be found within these types of pass-through agencies, because basically they are giving grant dollars to other organizations, like nonprofits, for example. Okay, so now why do we have this? What does this mean? So this basically allows us to see what our budget status is, or where our budget stands for a given time frame within the fiscal year. Now, looking at our encumbrances here, the encumbrances basically represent the dollar amounts that have not been yet expended, but those dollar amounts are not available to us to spend, if that makes sense. So we know that we have to pay somebody or have to buy something, but we have not actually uh, given the cash out to purchase that item or pay that person. But at the same time, since we know we have to make this transaction and the cash has not exchanged hands, the money is not available to be used for something else. So therefore, we have encumbered these dollars here so that we won't assume that they are available in the future. Okay, and if you think back to our discussion on modified accrual accounting, that's basically what's going on here. Uh, Expenditures have been recorded as transactions have taken place, although cash has not exchanged hands. That's what's going on here. So this money has just basically been set aside to be used because we know that we owe somebody. Okay. So we use the encumbrance plus our expenditures to find out how much money we have available, or whether how much money we've expended over the course of a given time frame. So looking at our next slide here, we first of all we use allotments to find the budget status, and then the budget status basically equals the total number of quarters, quarter one plus quarter two, minus encumbrances plus expenditures. So in this scenario, the budget status for the allotment as of March 31st, right, the second quarter, equals the first quarter plus the second quarter minus encumbrances plus expenses. Okay, so using that formula there, we can tell for salaries and benefits that we are at a zero budget status. That basically means we didn't overspend, we didn't underspend. We spent just the amount that we were budgeted. Okay. Now, I didn't do that for the remainder of our line items, but some of these, if you go back and do them, and hopefully you downloaded the notes that were attached and you can follow this. If you go back and do this, you'll see that you may have a negative in one or two of these line items. Now, if you have a negative, that doesn't mean the world ends, because you still have money available in your third and fourth quarters. Okay, so oftentimes when organizations might have an over expenditure based upon some unforeseen event in an earlier quarter, they will just borrow money from the future quarter, knowing that that money won't be available to be used later on in the fiscal year. So as long as you don't overexpend your budget overall, you're fine. But if you overexpend in a given quarter, but you still have plenty of money available over the course of the fiscal year, going back a couple of slides here. So, for example, uh, let's say if we were overexpended in the first quarter for let's look at equipment, computer equipment, right? Let's say we overexpended in the first quarter, in the first two quarters, based upon our encumbrances and our expenditures. However, but we know we had plenty of money left in the third and fourth quarters. You should be fine. So you should not have to really fret that your budget is going to be overexpended. So when we're thinking about our budget status, we're basically trying to figure out, whether or not we've overexpended or underexpended for a given time frame, and that allows us to be able to gauge our fiscal activity for the rest of the fiscal year.